Hello everyone. Hope you are all keeping fine. Till now we have discussed the first chapter, that is motion. We have studied all the concepts of motion. Today we will be discussing the next chapter of physics, that is force and laws of motion. So as we have discussed in the last class or in the last previous chapter, we have discussed all the concepts of motion, the graphical representation of motion, etc. So now this new chapter, that is force and laws of motion, is again a continuation of the motion chapter itself. And here we will be discussing the new term, or the term which we know, the force, and the relationship of force with motion. That is the main idea behind this chapter. We will be studying the concept or the relationship between the force and motion. Okay, so this force required for motion, that's what the prime question which we want to ask in this chapter. Is force inevitable for motion, or how motion and force is related? So we will be studying this concept in this chapter, and mainly we have these 5 points which we want to study in this chapter. These are the main 5 points which we want to study in this chapter. That is balanced and unbalanced forces, first law of motion, second law of motion, and third law of motion. That means for motion to happen, or the motion is happening according to 3 laws of motion. Okay, Isaac Newton has formulated 3 laws of motion, that is first law of motion, second law of motion, and third law of motion. Okay, so these 3 laws of motion we will study, and when we are studying first law of motion, we will come across a new term called inertia. We will discuss what it is. Okay, in the second law of motion we will be studying a new term, momentum. Okay, and from this second law of motion we are going to derive an important equation for force. We will be deriving the equation for force from the second law of motion. And third law of motion, we will be studying third law of motion, and this third law of motion is, you all will be knowing this third law of motion, but when we are discussing it, you will be understanding, oh, this is third law of motion. You will be familiar, you all are familiar with this third law of motion, but you may not be knowing that this is part of the laws of motion. Okay, and the last one we will be studying conservation of momentum. There is a small equation or a derivation. Okay, so these are the 5 important points to be studied in this chapter. Okay, first of all, before entering into these concepts, we have to recall something which we have studied in the last class, or last year in the 8th standard. We have studied what is force. We have studied what is force. So whatever you are studying in your lower classes, it is a connection, or it is a step which is required for us to achieve higher positions. Okay, so whatever we are studying in 9th standard, it is the continuation of what we have studied in 7th, 6th, 7th and 8th standards, or even from the beginning, from the first standard onwards. Okay, without studying addition or subtraction, we can't come across the polynomials or something of the higher concepts of mathematics, isn't it? Likewise, without studying or without having a good idea of your lower classes, the ideas or the concepts which you have studied in your lower classes, it will be very difficult for us to study in 9th and 10th standard, or even in the higher secondary classes. So whatever you are studying, you understand and study. If you have any doubts, you can ask your teachers. You can clarify all your doubts with your teachers. Okay. So force. What was force? What is force which you have studied in 8th standard? Force is a push or a pull. Okay, I am not getting into the details of those things again, but understand that whenever I am pushing this table will move. So I am applying force on this table, motion occurs. I am applying force on this table, motion occurs. A ball, the football player, he kicks the ball. Whenever the ball was standing still, it was not moving. But when the player came and kicked the ball, what happened? The ball flew away. or it started moving. That means motion is related with what? Application of force. Okay, so force is inevitable for motion. Okay, so what is force and all, we have studied it in your last classes, but now we have to understand an important point, that is balanced and unbalanced force. There are two types of forces, that is balanced force and unbalanced force. Okay, so listen, you have seen or you have come across a game called tug of war. Okay, a set of 7 players will be in two ends of, they will be holding two ends of a rope, a huge rope, and they will be pulling it towards their part. Okay, so what will happen? There will be a ribbon at the center of the rope, and whoever is able to cross that ribbon towards their line, there will be two lines also. If they are able to cross the ribbon towards their line, what will happen? They will be winning. Okay, they will be pulling the rope towards their end. Okay, so the team which will make the ribbon to cross the line which is there present at their end, they will be winning it. Okay, you have come across tug of war. Okay, so whenever the two teams are applying equal force, they are pulling the rope. Pulling is also a force application. Pushing is a force application. Pulling is a force application. So whenever the teams are pulling the ropes towards the end, who will win? Who will win? The team which apply more force, the one who is having more strength to pull the rope towards the end, who is applying more force, they will be winning. That means the application of force of the winning team is greater than that of the application of force of the losing team. Is that clear? The two teams will be pulling the ropes from two ends. The team which wins will be having more force. They will be applying more force towards the end, so they will be able to pull the rope towards the end or the ribbon towards the end. Clear? Isn't it? Okay, so is the application of force equal between the two teams? No, the force applied is different. There is some unbalance in the application of force. Okay, and you imagine like this, if both the teams were pulling at equal force, they are applying equal force from both the ends, what will happen? Will the rope move towards any of the end? The rope won't move towards any of them because they are applying equal force. That means they are applying balanced force. Okay, so two types of force are there, balanced force and unbalanced force. And if the teams were applying balanced force, equal force, what will happen? Will the rope move? Will the ribbon tied at the middle of the rope, will it move towards any of the end? No, there won't be any movement. But if one of the team is stronger than the other team and they are able to apply more force towards their end, that means there is an unbalanced force. There is an application of unbalanced force. Then what will happen? Then the ribbon or the rope will move towards that end, isn't it? So for motion to occur, we know force is inevitable. Without force, motion won't occur. That means if I want to move this table, if I want to make this table in motion, what I have to do? I have to apply force. So which force, which type of force I have to apply? That is the important question. Which type of force I have to apply? I have to apply unbalanced force. If we are applying balanced force, equal force from, if I am standing at this end and I am pushing this table from this end, and some other person is standing at this end of the table and if he is also pushing from this end, if both the persons are pushing equally, will the table move? No. But if a stronger person, if a fatty person is standing at this end and a lean person is standing at this end, then towards which end it will move, and they are pushing each other, which end it will move? The fatty person will push it towards the other end. That means he will apply more force than the lean person, than the skinny person. So then what will happen? Motion will occur. And if both fatty persons were there and they are applying equal force, balanced force, will the table move? No. So understand carefully, force is inevitable for motion. And which type of force is inevitable? Unbalanced force is inevitable for motion. unbalanced force is inevitable for motion. So that is the first concept which you have to keep it in mind when we are discussing force and laws of motion. When we are discussing force and laws of motion, understand clearly unbalanced force is required for motion. Okay, so now you can you can have a homework like this. Find out which are the applications of unbalanced forces in our day-to-day life. Okay, you can note it down in your notebook or in a piece of paper, a list of applications of unbalanced force by us in our day-to-day life. Okay, so you note it down in a paper, find out the list, and you will be wondering that these many applications of force we are doing it in our daily life. You will be wondering. Okay, so take it as homework. So we have studied the first concept, that is unbalanced force is inevitable for motion. That is clear? Okay.